Avoidants don't confess, they slip. And the moment they stop masking, you won't hear an admission. You'll see it. It reveals itself in the tiniest cracks, in the subtle shifts they never intended you to notice. For so long, their emotional walls were airtight, perfectly sealed, perfectly controlled, perfectly distant. But something changes when feelings start to outweigh fear. The armor doesn't fall off all at once. It loosens, it softens, and suddenly you start catching glimpses of the truth they spend their life hiding. They care far more than they want you to believe. They won't say it out loud because vulnerability to them feels like exposure, like surrender. So instead, their caring leaks through in ways they can't regulate. Maybe it's the way they remember small details you told them months ago. Maybe it's the unexpected check-ins when they sense your energy shifting. Maybe it's the way they pause a little too long before ending a conversation. Like part of them wants to stay, but fear pulls them back. Avoidants rarely give direct signals, so their care becomes visible only when their control starts slipping. And it always slips in moments they don't plan. You might notice the shift the first time they ask a question they never used to ask. Where you're going, who you're with, why you've been quieter than usual. They'll frame it casually as if it's nothing. They'll pretend it's just conversation, but it isn't. It's concern dressed as curiosity. It's interest disguised as indifference. It's the emotional truth they're trying not to show, cracking through the surface, and as you watch their behavior shift, you begin to feel the depth of the attachment they never want to feel in the first place. For avoidance, caring is chaotic. It disrupts the internal order they rely on. It makes them feel unprepared, exposed, overwhelmed. But when their feelings reach a point where silence can't control them anymore, the mask inevitably slips. You'll see it in the way they get uncomfortable when you detach. Not when you cry, not when you confront them, not when you express emotion, but when you pull back into your own peace. That's when their composure fractures. They might try to reconnect in subtle ways. They might hover a little closer. They might suddenly become more attentive, more present, more aware of your absence than your presence. And they'll never admit it, but inside they're losing the one thing they thought they had mastered: emotional distance. Because the truth is simple. Avoidants don't slip because they're careless. They slip because you matter. They slip because your energy affects them more deeply than they ever intended. They slip because the connection reached a point where their emotional walls could no longer hold everything in. And when those cracks begin to show, when their behavior stops matching their words, that's when you finally understand the truth they've been hiding behind: distance, silence, and self-protection. They care and they can no longer pretend they don't. Avoidants only ask when they're afraid to lose, and when that fear starts creeping in, their behavior shifts in ways even they don't fully understand. Suddenly, they begin asking questions they never asked before. Questions about where you're going, who you're seeing, why you sound different, why you replied slower, why your energy feels off. They try to make it sound casual, like they're just making conversation. But underneath that surface level calm, something much deeper is happening. Your detachment is touring the very panic they've been trying to outrun their entire lives. Avoidants don't initiate emotional curiosity unless something inside them is shaking. When they sense distance, even subtle distance, they feel the loss before it actually happens. And that fear forces them into unfamiliar territory, into noticing, caring, and paying attention in ways they've always avoided. At first, the questions come lightly, a simple, "You heading out or everything good?" But the intention behind them is anything but light. It's their attempt to understand the shift they feel but can't articulate. Avoidance rely on predictability. They rely on your consistency, your effort, your emotional presence. When that pattern changes, their internal alarm goes off. They start observing things they used to ignore. They start noticing details they previously filtered out. And without meaning to, they begin seeking reassurance, but in the least vulnerable way possible, through indirect questions. You might hear it in their tone, that subtle edge of tension. You might see it in the way they linger after asking, waiting for your answer more carefully than they want to show. Because to them, your distance doesn't feel like space. It feels like loss. And loss for an avoidant isn't just painful, it's destabilizing. So instead of opening up, instead of admitting what they fear, they try to gather information like a shield. They want to know what shifted so they can control the panic rising inside them. They want to know who or what is taking up the emotional room they once assumed they'd always have. And they want to know why your tone, your presence, your rhythm feels different, even if they don't have the courage to say it directly. This is the moment when the avoidance emotional detachment begins to crack. It's subtle, quiet, almost hidden, but unmistakable. When they start asking what they previously ignored, it means they're no longer indifferent. It means your distance is affecting them. It means the emotional gap they once relied on is closing, but not by your force, by your absence. And while they'll never admit that it bothers them, their questions speak for them. Every "where are you going" is really "are you drifting away from me?" Every "who are you with" is really "is someone else replacing me?" Every "you okay" is really "I feel like I'm losing you." Avoidants don't ask out of control. They ask out of fear. Fear that the one person who brought them closeness without demand is slipping out of reach. Their silence screams louder than their words. Because when an avoidant gets jealous, they won't react the way most people do. They won't confront you, they won't question you directly, and they definitely won't admit what they're feeling. Instead, everything happens inside them, quietly, intensely, and completely against their will. When they see you laughing with someone else, giving your energy to someone new, or simply shifting your attention away from them, something in them tightens. They feel that subtle sting, that emotional jolt, that internal drop they can't name. But instead of expressing it, they retreat into silence. Not because they don't care, but because caring feels like exposure. Jealousy, to them, isn't a sign of affection. It's a threat, a reminder that someone else could take the emotional space they were never sure they deserved in the first place. Avoidants are masters at hiding their reactions. That's how they've survived emotional closeness their entire lives. But jealousy disrupts their emotional balance in a way they can't fully control. They become quieter, more observant. They start analyzing your behavior, your tone, your patterns, trying to understand why someone else is receiving the parts of you they once took for granted. And even though they say nothing, their silence carries a weight you can feel. They might pull back, but not because they're indifferent, because they're overwhelmed. The discomfort hits them in a place they've kept locked for years. They're not angry at you, they're terrified of what those feelings mean. You'll notice it in the shift of their energy. Maybe they become colder without explanation. Maybe they go distant after seeing you interact with someone in a way that makes them uneasy. Maybe they suddenly want less space, even though they won't say it out loud. Avoidant jealousy is subtle, but it's powerful. They won't argue. They won't make accusations. Instead, they internalize everything, letting the fear grow quietly. They wonder if you're replacing them. They wonder if someone else sees the things in you that they were too afraid to appreciate openly. And the worst part for them, they know they have no right to speak up because speaking up requires vulnerability, and vulnerability terrifies them more than jealousy itself. So they swallow it. They pretend they don't care. They act unbothered. But behind that composed exterior is a storm of insecurity and longing they don't know how to navigate. They replay the moment they saw you with someone else. They overthink the way you smiled, the way you engaged, the way your energy shifted. They don't show it, but it rattles them deeply because losing emotional access feels more threatening to an avoidant than losing the relationship itself. And this is the irony. The moment they feel they're losing you is the moment their true attachment reveals itself. Their silence isn't apathy, it's emotional panic wrapped in self-protection. They feel jealousy intensely, but they lock it inside because they don't know how to express the one truth that terrifies them most. They care far more than they'll ever admit. Avoidants don't chase, but they stop feeling safe when you stop chasing their calm. That signature emotional composure they wear like armor slowly begins to crack the moment they sense your energy shifting away from them. At first, they try to maintain the same detached rhythm, acting unfazed, acting indifferent, acting like nothing in their world has changed. But inside, something is definitely changing. The space that once felt comfortable to them now feels threatening. The quiet that once gave them control now feels too empty. And the calm they once hid behind begins turning into restlessness. They start checking your socials more than they want to admit. They reread old conversations, replay old moments, and linger longer than usual on the last goodbye you gave them, hoping to find reassurance in places where reassurance no longer lives. Avoidance don't move toward you when they feel insecure. That would require vulnerability. Instead, they hover in your orbit quietly, emotionally, invisibly. They watch without approaching. They feel without expressing. They want without reaching. That's their version of pursuit, staying close enough to feel connected, but far enough to feel protected. And when you stop chasing, the foundation they built their emotional safety on begins to crumble. Because your pursuit was never just effort to them, it was proof that you still cared, proof they hadn't lost you, proof that connection didn't have to be overwhelming. When that proof disappears, so does their sense of control. You'll see it in the small shifts. They take longer to reply, not because they're uninterested, but because they're overthinking what to say. They appear online more often, but don't message, hovering in hesitation. They suddenly view your stories, even if they ignored them before. They give pieces of attention without giving presence. This is avoidant restlessness, movement without direction, emotion without confession. They can't bring themselves to pursue you, but they also can't bring themselves to let you go. They exist in that uncomfortable in-between space, hoping you will close the gap for them, like you always have. But this time, you don't, and that's what shakes them. Your quiet becomes louder than any emotional plea. Your distance becomes clearer than any argument. Your peace becomes the one thing they can't decode. Because avoidants are used to emotional chaos, not emotional withdrawal. They know how to shut down when someone pushes forward, but they don't know how to stay calm when someone pulls back. Your stillness exposes their fear. Your silence exposes their attachment. And your lack of effort exposes just how much effort they actually needed from you to feel secure. They won't chase, not in the traditional sense, but their behavior betrays the truth. They check your socials because they miss your presence. They reread old messages because they miss your closeness. They linger on your goodbye because they fear it was the last one. They don't move toward you, but they can't move on either. And in that emotional limbo, their calm dissolves into restlessness, revealing everything they worked so hard to hide. When an avoidant circles back, it's not curiosity, it's attachment leaking through. They don't revisit old conversations because they suddenly remembered the topic or because something reminded them of it. They do it because something inside them is reaching for connection in the safest way they know how. Avoidants fear direct emotional expression, so they use the past as a bridge. They bring up things from weeks or months ago, not because they care about the content, but because they care about the familiarity. The old conversation becomes a backdoor into closeness, a doorway they can walk through without feeling exposed. For them, revisiting the past means they're trying to re-enter your emotional space without admitting they miss being there. You'll notice the pattern when they're feeling your distance. Suddenly, they mention something small you said long ago, a joke you shared, an unfinished topic, or an inside reference only the two of you understand. It seems random to you, but to them it's the safest way to reconnect without saying, I miss you. It's their way of confirming the bond is still alive, still accessible, still theirs. Avoidants don't chase with intensity. They chase with subtlety. They don't say, I want to talk to you. Instead, they say, remember when or what happened with that thing you mentioned? It feels harmless, but emotionally, it's loaded. This is how you know the emotional walls are shifting. Avoidants avoid the present when the present feels threatening, but they revisit the past when the past feels like the only place they can express closeness without fear. You might notice they linger longer in these conversations. They ask follow-up questions. They stay engaged in a way they didn't before. They show curiosity, not about the topic, but about you. They want to feel that connection again, but they want it in a controlled, familiar way. They're testing the temperature without stepping into the water. When they're scared of losing you, this behavior intensifies. They bring up memories they never acknowledged meant anything. They reference details you thought they forgot. They search for emotional openings in old conversations because those openings feel safer than creating new ones. For an avoidant, the past becomes a rehearsal space for vulnerability. It's where they can be close without feeling cornered, where they can lean in without feeling overwhelmed. And the more your energy pulls back, the more they return to these emotional echoes. Your silence wakes something inside them. Your distance creates discomfort. Your absence unlocks the attachment they tried to suppress. So instead of saying, I feel you slipping away, they say, whatever happened with that thing you were dealing with? It's disguised intimacy. It's hidden longing. It's their heart speaking through their habits. When an avoidant circles back, it's not random. It's not meaningless. It's not about the topic. It's about you. It's about the connection they're afraid to lose, but too scared to pursue openly. This is how their attachment leaks through quietly, subtly, in ways they hope you'll feel, even if they never say it out loud. Avoidants don't get inconsistent, they get scared. That's why their behavior seems to swing like a pendulum back and forth between closeness and distance. One moment they pull away, disappearing into their own world as if you never existed, and the next they show up again, soft, attentive, almost present. Then they vanish without warning, only to linger around the edges of your life, like they're waiting for an invitation they're too afraid to ask for. To you, it feels like mixed signals. To them, it feels like survival. Their actions aren't random and they aren't manipulative. They're the outward expression of an internal tug of war they've been fighting since childhood. It's the emotional conflict between fear and longing, between wanting connection and fearing it will hurt, between reaching for you and running from themselves. When an avoidant starts caring, everything inside them becomes louder. Their defenses, once strong and automatic, start to glitch under the weight of real emotional attachment. They don't know how to hold closeness without feeling exposed, but they don't know how to detach without feeling the loss. So they fluctuate. They lean in because they want you, then pull back because wanting you terrifies them. They get close enough to feel connection, but far enough to feel safe. Their inconsistency isn't indifference, it's panic. It's their nervous system reacting to a bond they weren't taught how to maintain. It's the fear of being hurt, battling the desire to be understood. You'll notice the pattern. They withdraw after a good moment. They go silent after intimacy. They distance themselves after a vulnerable conversation. They panic when emotions get real because emotions mean risk. But then they return. They always circle back once the fear settles. They reappear in subtle ways, replying to something old, watching your stories, liking something they ignored for days. Then they linger, as if waiting for you to make the first emotional move again. This cycle isn't about you doing something wrong. It's about them wrestling with feelings they don't know how to manage. Their mixed signals start to make sense when you understand this. Avoidance long for connection just as deeply as anyone else. They just weren't equipped to handle it. So when you get close, they feel exposed. When you pull away, they feel abandoned. When you stay consistent, they trust you, but fear depending on you. Every emotional reaction inside them is contradictory. They want closeness, but closeness triggers old wounds. They want distance, but distance makes them feel the emptiness. They want reassurance, but asking for it feels vulnerable. This is why their behavior feels inconsistent to the outside world. But inside them, it's all one tangled emotional truth. They care, and caring scares them. And here's the deeper layer. Your presence stabilizes them, but your absence exposes them. That's why they run, return, hide, linger. It's why they push you away but hold on to the thread that ties them to you. Because the moment they start caring is the moment their emotional mask begins to slip. And what you're seeing isn't inconsistency. It's fear trying to coexist with longing, and longing refusing to let fear win completely. Avoidance only open doors they secretly want you to walk through. And when they begin giving you access, real access, emotional access, vulnerable access, you are witnessing something that almost no one else ever gets to see. Avoidants keep their world tightly guarded. Their inner life is a locked room with layers of security, boundaries, and self-protection built over years of emotional fear. But when they start letting you in, offering details about their day, their thoughts, their insecurities, their past, it's not accidental, it's not casual, it's not meaningless. It's a sign that your presence has reached a depth their defenses can't deny. You become the exception in the places they usually keep everyone out. They may not give you grand emotional confessions, but they will give you things they've never shared with others. You'll hear the small truths they bury under silence. You'll catch glimpses of softness in the way their voice changes or their energy drops when they talk about something vulnerable. They may open up about their childhood, their fears, their stress, the things that overwhelm them, pieces of themselves. They normally hide because trust has never been safe for them. But with you, it becomes safer. Not simple, not easy, but safer. And that shift is everything. You'll notice it in the way they start asking for your opinion, really asking, not just politely. You'll notice it in the way they begin including you in the parts of their daily world they used to navigate alone. You'll notice it in the way they begin sharing their private thoughts, their inside jokes, their random midnight messages that feel like they were holding something in until it spilled out. This isn't random behavior, this is emotional access. And avoidants don't give emotional access unless something in them feels a connection they can't emotionally detach from. This is also the moment when the avoidant can no longer pretend you don't matter. They may still try to act like they're unfazed on the surface, but their behavior tells the truth. They lean in a little closer. They let you see them when they're tired, overwhelmed, or unfiltered. They let you hear the softness behind the guarded tone. They trust you with emotions they don't even trust themselves with. And even though they won't say it directly, this is their version of intimacy. This is care disguised as conversation. This is attachment disguised as openness. Avoidance don't allow access unless it means something. They don't reveal themselves unless they feel something. And they don't soften unless someone has touched them deeply enough to bypass their defenses. So when they let you into their inner world, even if it's just small pieces, subtle details, quiet moments, it's a sign that their emotional walls have given way to something stronger than fear. This is the turning point. This is when their actions speak louder than their denial. This is when the avoidance heart starts telling the truth. They're too scared to say out loud. Because when they open the door, even just an inch, it means one thing. You matter more than they ever intended you to. Your silence exposes how much they were pretending. Avoidance can tolerate almost anything. Tears, emotional conversations, arguments, even disappointment, because those things allow them to retreat into the familiar safety of emotional distance. But your emotional detachment, your calm, your silence, that's the one thing they can't ignore. Avoidants don't panic when you cry. They panic when you go quiet. Because your silence holds a truth their defenses can no longer outrun. It forces them to confront what they've been trying to deny, suppress, and rationalize for as long as they've cared about you. That they feel something deep, real, and hard to control. And once your energy shifts, their mask begins to crumble. When you detach, it doesn't just create space, it creates exposure. They can suddenly feel the absence of your presence in a way that rattles them. They notice your shorter replies. They notice your slower responses. They notice when you stop initiating, stop checking in, stop carrying the emotional weight of the connection for both of you. And even though they won't say a word, the shift hits them hard. Your silence becomes a mirror, showing them the very feelings they tried to hide from you and from themselves. Instead of feeling relieved by the space, they feel unsettled, off balance, and unable to find the emotional control they once relied on. Avoidants pretend they don't care as a survival strategy, not because they truly don't care, but when you withdraw your emotional availability, their pretense collapses. They feel you slipping away, not through drama, not through confrontation, but through your peace. And that peace activates a fear deeper than any argument ever could. Suddenly, they find themselves checking in more often, not overtly, not dramatically, but in quiet, subtle ways. Viewing your stories the moment you post them, lingering on your profile, rereading old conversations, scanning your social media for clues about your mood or your attention. They hover around your energy, unable to step forward but terrified to let you fade. This is the moment when their emotional conflict reaches its peak. They want to reach out, but fear stops them. They want to act unaffected, but they can't hide how your distance destabilizes them. They want to stay silent, but the silence feels like losing you. For an avoidant, emotional detachment from the person who made them feel safe is the deepest trigger. It threatens their illusion of control. It threatens their emotional equilibrium. It forces them to feel everything they've tried so hard to suppress. Your silence doesn't punish them, it reveals them. It reveals their care, their fear, their attachment, their longing. It reveals the truth behind all their distancing behaviors. They weren't running from you. They were running from the feelings you awakened in them. And when those feelings become undeniable, when your emotional distance strips away the safety of denial, they're left with one truth they can no longer escape. They care deeply, intensely, more than they ever meant to. Avoidants express feelings through behavior, not words. They rarely say what's on their mind, rarely admit what's in their heart, and rarely show vulnerability directly. But when their fear of losing you surfaces, it appears in subtle, almost invisible ways. Suddenly, they start checking on you more than usual. They ask if you're okay, if you're tired, if you've eaten, if you're stressed, but always with that casual tone, as if it's nothing important. They frame it as concern, but it's not casual at all. Every small action, every seemingly innocent question carries weight. Beneath the surface, their behaviors are a silent confession. Your absence affects them more than they expected. The avoidance fear of loss isn't loud, it's hidden in the gestures, the repeated check ins, the lingering attention that contradicts the cool detachment they insist on projecting. You might notice that they appear slightly more present, even when they try to act indifferent. They remember details you mentioned in passing, showing they've been paying attention even when it seemed like they weren't. They might reach out about things that seem trivial, not because they care about the topic itself, but because they're trying to maintain a connection, testing whether you're still there. Avoidants rarely express neediness overtly, so their concern is their way of managing the fear that you might drift away. Every question they ask is a small bridge reaching toward you, a subtle plea disguised as casual care. Their fear of losing you shows up in timing as well. They might appear when you're least expecting it. In moments where their concern feels like coincidence but is actually intentional. They notice changes in your tone, in your energy, in your schedule, things you think are invisible to anyone else. Their fear makes them hyper aware of the slightest shift, and yet won't acknowledge it directly. They can't say, I'm afraid of losing you, because admitting that would mean exposing their vulnerability, and avoidance fear emotional exposure more than almost anything else. So instead, their concern takes the form of action, a text, a call, a subtle check-in, or a lingering presence. They hope you'll notice. This is why their behavior can feel confusing. It's not that they suddenly care more, it's that the threat of losing you has triggered a reaction they can't contain. Your absence has created a tension inside them that manifests in gestures rather than words. Avoidants are experts at emotional regulation, but your detachment forces them to feel in ways they're not used to. They may still pull back or act distant in other areas, but these small, consistent behaviors reveal the truth they can't verbally admit. They care, and your absence is painful. Every subtle action, every casual sounding check in, every quiet attempt to reconnect is proof that your presence matters more than they ever let themselves acknowledge. Avoidance can't run from this truth forever because your detachment forces their feelings into the open. And even though they try to hide it behind nonchalance and control, the reality is clear. They're afraid of losing you. And that fear shows up in the only way they know how, through behavior, not words. The moment you stop proving you care is the moment the avoidant realizes they do. All the chasing, the patience, the emotional labor you invested, suddenly none of it matters anymore. Your withdrawal doesn't just create distance, it creates clarity. Avoidants thrive in the gray area where they can keep you close without feeling vulnerable, where they can maintain control without confronting their own feelings. But when you step back, when you stop proving your care, when you stop filling the gaps they once relied on you to fill, everything changes. Your absence forces a confrontation they've been avoiding for as long as they've known you. Your peace, the calm confidence in your own boundaries and self-worth becomes a mirror reflecting the truth they've spent so long hiding from. They care more than they ever admitted, more than they ever intended to feel, more than they can ignore. It's subtle at first. They notice your quiet, your independence, your refusal to chase, your ability to maintain emotional stability without them, and it unsettles them. That unsettling isn't about anger or frustration, it's about recognition. They see that your energy no longer revolves around them, and suddenly the dynamic they relied on for safety no longer exists. The control they thought they had is gone. The predictability they depended on to keep their distance, and in that absence of certainty, something within them stirs. They begin to feel the weight of what they've been avoiding. Your withdrawal doesn't punish them, it illuminates the truth they've tried to ignore. They can't pretend they don't care anymore. Avoidants aren't used to having to confront their feelings without distraction. They are skilled at evading, at deflecting, at rationalizing distance as neutrality, but your growth, your self respect, your boundaries, your peace offers no escape. It forces them into introspection. It forces them to feel what they've been pretending not to feel, and it is uncomfortable. Your calm, your independence, your refusal to revolve your life around their emotional availability, it creates a discomfort that is both unfamiliar and unavoidable. Suddenly, the walls they built to protect themselves feel transparent, and the feelings they buried can no longer be ignored. They notice in the small ways, the subtle longing in their glances, the quiet observation of your routines, the hesitation in their words when you appear. Every action becomes measured because internally they're grappling with the truth. Your energy no longer allows them to hide. They can attempt avoidance. They can distract themselves. They can rationalize. But the reality is undeniable. Your growth highlights their attachment. Your withdrawal highlights their care. And your peace highlights the emotional cost of everything they've kept it. The moment you stop proving your care isn't about revenge, it's about evolution. It's about reclaiming your energy, your presence, and your worth. And for the avoidant, that very act of stepping back becomes a mirror they cannot look away from. The truth hits, they can't pretend they don't care anymore because your energy no longer lets them hide. And for the first time, they are forced to feel what they've long denied.